Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special LinkedIn Live. I am Lybra Clemons, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer at Twilio. And I am so honored today to welcome a very special guest as we celebrate Trans Day of Visibility. Please join me in welcoming Jeopardy champion Amy Schneider. Did I sound like Oprah? I hope so. I was like, Schneider. Did I get the Oprah effect?
Yeah, no, not
Welcome,
bad, not bad.
Amy. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. She's like, yeah, no, kind of. Awesome, awesome. So I have to tell you, I was tuning in. I was not watching Jeopardy for a while, but once I heard you had that streak, it was just like all eyes were on you as this contestant. So tell me about your experience. I mean, we're going to talk about so many other things, but like top
Yeah.
line Jeopardy experience. What was that like? How does one prep for a Jeopardy experience or a Jeopardy appearance?
Yeah. So I mean I think two aspects of that. One is just the process of getting on. It took me maybe close to 15 years from when I first auditioned to when I actually got on the show.
Wow.
So it's somewhere in the range of like 1 to 3% of people that audition, get on in a given season. So it's definitely, the odds are against you. And you gotta kind of be persistent on that. Um and in terms of like preparing for it, I think, to an extent, you just have to be preparing for it, your whole life, in the sense of that you're just learning in your whole
Yeah.
life. I think that at least for me, I couldn't do much sort of like, cramming for it or anything like that, just because I don't really work that way.
Yeah.
So I just am always like looking around, just kind of like clicking around on Wikipedia for something that might be interesting, and reading and all that sort of thing. But I will say that like the one thing that you know I do strongly recommend is A, watching the show, and B, going through the archives of old questions and answers, because part of what made me successful at it was being able to interpret the clue, because like
Yes.
their format can give it some weird syntax, and learning A, what's the actual question they're asking, and B, what are you start to be able to see the hints. There's like little hints at the clue, that when you've watched it for years, you can kind of see like, oh yeah, when they say Jewish painter, they're always talking about Marc Chagall, or things like that.
So do they repeat at all? I mean, I'm just thinking, how many years have
Mhm.
they been on? They have to repeat some of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they repeat, word for word.
Yeah.
But certainly there are topics that get, asked about more often than others.
Yeah.
And I think it is about those things that they can find multiple ways into, the things that like, that they can be like, I thought of an example just the other day, but things that kind of have a bunch of different associations, so that when they're reusing the same answer, they can find different ways to hint
Different
it for
ways to
you.
ask the question, which is
Yeah.
repeatedly asking the question in a question format. I love
Yeah.
that. I mean, I think I sit around and think about like I go through Wikipedia if I'm watching TV. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and then you can go down a spiral of finding more information. And I
Yeah.
do wonder now that we have more access to information and data using our phones and computers, whereas before you read the encyclopedia. Is it a little bit easier to get those answers? Do you find that it's probably when you started 15 years ago, the internet was available, but now
hmm
everything's at our fingertips. Do you find that that was a little bit easier to navigate, that you had the information you could just know?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think, it's one of those things where it's like if I'm, just sort of like on my phone, on a computer, whatever, kind of going through a game, being like, oh yeah, I never remember the orders of Greek columns or something like
Yeah.
that. I can just go, click over to it, another app, and find that out. Whereas, I mean, I'm old enough. I grew up without the internet at all, and like, how would I have gone about that? I would like, had to go to the library or
The
whatever, and it just would have
library.
been, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those were the days. And the smell of the library and the card catalog, so calming, so calming.
Yeah.
But you also made history, which I thought was
Mm.
so amazing. So, as the most winning woman and first transgender contestant to qualify for the Tournament of Champions, what did that mean to you?
I mean, it's great. I mean, there's a certain feeling of like, why, why is that the case? Wwhy has that not been more like that already? But, it is what it is, and somebody had to be the first, and I'm not sorry that it was me.
Yeah,
Um,
me neither.
and it yeah, and it's also, like those first, I don't know, 8 years that I was trying out for Jeopardy was before I transitioned, and I'm so thankful that I didn't get on then, because it would have been such a bummer to look back on, and it wouldn't have had this broader impact that I've really seen that it has.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that. Let's talk about your experience and what
Yeah.
it meant for you. I mean, when you were talking about the number of times you tried out for Jeopardy, and I just think
Mhm.
about your persistence in general. I'm sure there's something to do with like how you grew up, who you are, and who you are right now, and how you've come into your own. And that's part of persistence as well. So you could tell us a little bit about your life and growing up and your experiences.
Yeah, so I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a pretty
Woohoo! No context whatsoever. I just like saying that.
Yes, go Flyers. But I was raised in a relatively conservative Catholic environment. And it was the 80s. So in terms of like trans stuff and things like that, like nobody even knew about it. Like it's not
Yeah,
even like, my parents were against the idea of trans people that just didn't exist in our world. But in terms of like Jeopardy, like my mom was a college professor, my dad was a programmer that worked at a college. They were very much into learning, and they were into learning more than education per se. They
mm,
weren't too worried about me getting into the best college or what grades I got or things like that. They just wanted me, they just in a sense they just wanted to be able to have interesting conversations with me.
yeah. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And so when I think about just how our experiences shape who we are, when you were
Mhm.
talking about they just wanted to experience, they wanted you to have these learning experiences. Do you think you were naturally curious and continue to kind of lean into your curiosity as you started to question and start to step into who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always hard to disentangle, nature versus nurture and that sort of thing. But I think, most likely I would have been pretty curious wherever I was. And
Yeah,
I think another thing that does lead into that is, the sort of being trans and knowing that something is off, knowing that things that people are telling you aren't true. And
right.
so trying to find out why that is.
Yeah,
But that said, I mean, I didn't really start taking all my curiosity and applying it to myself till well into my 30s.
yeah,
And I was just in a sense I was being curious about other things kind of to avoid thinking about myself for a long time.
yeah.
But it still was a great habit to develop, and once I finally did try to figure out who I was, it was really handy.
And what advice would you give people? Because I've heard that story before. I mean, there
Hmm.
are people that are starting the process and know very early on. I think the times are a little different. I mean, there are things
Yeah.
that are a little backwards, but there are times where people are more open about it and there's more
Hmm.
information, there's more access. And so,
Hmm.
I'm sure you talk to people all the time that are in the process or thinking about it. And what kind of advice and counsel
Hmm.
would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I'd say from my experience and almost every trans person I've talked to is that in that time leading up to it, when you're considering and questioning, um you are going to vastly exaggerate the negative consequences and vastly underestimate the positive consequences.
Yep.
So like, and partly some of that is just the natural thing that when you're anxious about something, you envision all the ways it can go wrong, and it's like not all of them will. But I think more so on the positive side was the revelation to me that like it made me a more social person. I make friends more easily. It made me, I think, more charismatic, helped me get on Jeopardy. It just really changed so many things about my life for the better, and not just, I just wanted to be able to, wear a dress and have the right pronouns, but it turned out to be so much more. It's
Absolutely.
really a liberating experience.
I love that word. I love
Yeah.
anything liberating to me. I just feel like there's a release, there's a relief. It's also a teachable moment for people when people feel liberated. You can share your story, share your truth. So I embrace that word. It's like one of my favorite words this year. It's kind of this liberation and liberating. So
Yeah.
let's pivot to tech.
Hmm.
Software engineer. Ah, hello, Twilio. Tell us about that experience. What's it like working in tech? What was it like working in tech?
Yeah, I mean, I started out in, like when I switched my major to computer science
Hmm.
in college, I really found out that it's, that it's an active translation, that you're translating between, human requirements and a computer that is stupid and won't make any assumptions or get any subtext. And so that was what really drew me into it and what I loved and love about it. I think that the first job I had was a tech company in Ohio, and then the rest of them have been out here in the Bay Area, and that's, I think, definitely a very different environment.
You think?
Um, yeah, yeah. But in terms of like transitioning and my workplace and things like that, that actually went really great. And I think that's, I mean, it's almost a cliche that trans women work in tech, but for whatever reason. But I was at a really great place at the time that was really serious about diversity and not just using the words and the slogans and things.
Yeah.
So it was a place that I trusted, that with that, and that they would be on my side and help, any negative consequences they'd help protect me from, which was, really valuable.
Yeah. So when you were currently at a company, you were
Mhm.
a software engineer when you started your transition. So did you think what I'm hearing from you is a very supportive environment and supportive process?
Mhm.
What advice would you give companies or people, companies in particular, for those employees who are transitioning? What advice would you give them to create a supportive environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is just making it easy to change your name, like some, the way
Which,
some
by
companies
the
are set
way,
up.
is not
Yeah.
that easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, having to go through, and it's like, it's on your email address, it's on, all these other things, and that's, be aware that that is a thing that your employees will need at some point, and
Yes.
be prepared for that. And I think, the other thing is like, normalizing pronoun usage and disclosure, and just having it be a thing that's out there, like not necessarily in people's faces, but like potentially on your name in a Zoom call or things like that, so that the person, the trans person doesn't feel the need to be constantly explaining themselves.
Right. And so, can you explain to those who don't understand and know what a dead name is?
Yeah. So dead name is, the name that I was, the name on my birth certificate, the name that I grew up with. Um and it's really, in a sense it's probably going to follow me all my life, because it's
Mhm.
just like, in so many systems, and it's like I'm going to keep getting mail addressed to my dead name and things like that. But it it sucks. And it's hard to explain why that it hits so hard to see that. Like I'm not even sure, it doesn't seem like it ought to, but it really is hard to be addressed as your dead name.
It's
um
hard to be addressed because it's not who you are. So, I can imagine
yeah,
why it hits. I mean, if someone's calling me by someone else's name or some other, that's not me. So, I don't understand what we're talking about. It does hit, and it reminds
yeah,
you of what you used to be, and that's okay. But it's no longer relevant, and it's not who you are right now. So, I can imagine what that is like.
yeah. I mean, I think an analogy would be like, using someone's dead name is, it's like if somebody had a name that you weren't familiar with, that was from a different language, and you didn't bother to try and learn how to pronounce it.
That
It's that
happens
same
all
side of, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
It literally happens all the time. And I love that analogy. It's something that our team at Twilio and the company were also pushing against because it's, becoming more global and people are not willing to take the moment or the time to learn other people's names or even address
Hmm.
other people or just anyone by their true identity and who they are. So it's an
Hmm.
acknowledgement of who we are. We lead with our identity. So I can
Hmm.
imagine what that's like, which is why it's so important that we have this Trans Day of Visibility so that people fully understand and embody why this is important, that what companies need to do, and that people can fully understand, especially to your point of your parents. If you're a learner, if you're curious, learn more. How do you make
Mm-hmm.
this a more an environment that's supportive, but also that's promoting as much equity as possible? And that
Mm-hmm.
leads me to a bit around about Twilio and our commitment to becoming an anti-racist organization.
Mm-hmm.
2020, I really want to take a minute and say, I really want to. I hope we get to a point where I don't have to say in 2020, because I know that was such a pivotal year, but it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it was such a challenging year. But pivotal for Twilio, because Twilio committed to becoming an anti-racist organization. And I
Mm-hmm.
joined shortly after they made this declaration. And we have worked with the CEO and the executive team to really do our best to define what it is and to advocate our anti-racist values. And so, what we define anti-racism to be, it seems very U.S. and Westernized because it
Mm-hmm.
is rooted through rooted in the word racism, but it is
Yeah.
an umbrella term for all isms, obias, and everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
to be an anti-racist is someone who is actively and radically promoting equity at all costs. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you were talking about liberation and feeling liberated, one of the tenets of becoming an anti-racist is that I can't be liberated if nobody else is. Like if
Mm-hmm.
other marginalized groups, even if I don't identify as them, I can't feel liberated if they are not. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would love to hear, and I hope I explained it correctly, what we're,
Yeah.
because anti-racism gets very convoluted and we're
Yeah.
defining it in different parts of the globe so that it makes sense. We're in Europe, we're referring to it as anti-oppression. In Asia,
Mm-hmm.
we're referring to it anti-bias. And LATAM, we're still kind of working through what it means to be anti-racist and also anti-bias. But
Mm-hmm.
in my definition or quest to try to explain that to you, I would love to hear about what you think about anti-racism and what people can do to continue to promote equity for people who are living and who are marginalized and continue to feel marginalized.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the first thing I'd say, because I have, worked on, D&I type, committees and stuff in jobs, and some of them have been better than others. And, one company that was really bad and fighting with them, and it was just trying to get across the business, value of it.
Yeah.
And I think that, one thing that I think people don't think about as much, but if an employee isn't bringing their whole self to the job, they're not going to do as good of a job.
Hmm.
If they are, hiding their gender identity, if they're feeling the need to, act white in an unnatural way, any of those things, you're not getting as much performance out of the employee. Like, it's a good idea for a lot of reasons. And I think that, it does then have to go a lot farther than most companies are willing to go. It has to look at, not just, are you like, are you hiring the right people? Are you expanding your candidate pool? Are
Exactly.
you, promoting the right people? And is the impact of your product supporting that mission as well?
Exactly.
Because you can be anti-racist in your own company and that helps your company, but there's a responsibility to the broader society and how your product is used in it.
I love that. Amy, you're like an all around like software engineer, Jeopardy champion, like a DEI anti-racist advocate. I love it. I love it. So we're going to get to know you a little bit better with these lightning round questions. Are you ready? I'm so glad you're
Yeah.
not asking me. All right. Favorite book?
Uh I guess I'd say Moby Dick, actually.
Wow.
You,
And
you
why?
know, because it just has, every time I read it I find something new in it, and
Yeah.
I think there's other books that, like, I sort of enjoy the sort of pleasure of reading them. There's a sort of steampunk fantasy novel called The Goblin Emperor that I reread over and over again.
Mhm.
But I'm not getting anything new out of it, I'm just enjoying it. But
Yeah.
like Moby Dick, like if I was trapped on a desert island and only had one book, that would be it,
That would be
because
a book.
it's inexhaustible.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So you recently got engaged. Congratulations. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yes, you
Thank you.
became engaged, got
Yeah.
engaged. I don't know. I need to work on those verbs. I don't know how. But anyway, your favorite date night activity with Genevieve. She's my favorite name, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we met during pandemic, so like most of our date nights are sitting on the couch and watching Netflix. But I think that like we've started going to movies more, and that's been really nice. We both miss that. And I think there's a better answer that I'm not coming up with.
That's
I
okay, because
guess,
even in a pandemic, going to the movies is big. That's major.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
major.
I guess what I'd say is it's a date weekend rather than a date night, but going up to Sonoma, we do that a lot.
Isn't
Yeah,
that great? So
yeah.
pleasant, so nice. Okay, favorite band?
Um, I guess I mean Fiona Apple in terms of who I listen to. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Because we're a tech company, what is your favorite coding language?
Um I think Python.
Mm,
I started my career in C++, and I have a certain nostalgia for it. It's sort of like driving stick in a way. Like you have to do a lot more, but you feel more in control. But at the end of the day, if I was starting a new project right now, I'd be leaning towards Python.
awesome, awesome. So this has been fantastic. We always do this with our very, very special guests. As you can tell, I'm wearing the most amazing Twilio track jacket and it zips. But anyway, we this is you earn your track jacket. We some either employees at Twilio, we call Twilions, or others customers by putting together a really interesting or building a code for us or for yourself using some of our Twilio products. And so, because you're an honorary Twilion, because of the work that you've done, you've been a software engineer, you are a DNI maverick. Who knew I might be calling you for some other stuff? We really want to present you with an honorary red track jacket. So I
Hmm.
think you already have it. I think the
Yes,
Twilion
indeed.
yes, fairies decided to, yay, there you are. It looks awesome. So I'm sure at some point we're going to get a picture with you in the jacket. And I just want to say thank you so much. This has been such an honor for me, such an honor. I'm sure for the everyone that's listening to have an opportunity to talk to you. And I look forward to seeing what you build in the future. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in a red jacket and a Twilio. So thanks a
Yeah,
lot for your time, Amy.
you're welcome. This is really fun.
Awesome.